Thank you, and welcome to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name is Eric. I'm joined by my co-host, Kevin. Welcome back for our 34th episode this week, where we'll be previewing the upcoming Patriots season opener versus the Miami Dolphins, previewing the Patriots season overall, and discussing news around the NFL. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pats300LevelPod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary on news of the day, as well as at our website at Pats300LevelPod.com. So, Kevin, just to start, the Dolphins game coming up, it's in Miami. Any overall thoughts? I know traditionally Patriots have had some struggles in Miami, especially early in the season. I know the heat is a little bit to get used to. They're traveling there a little early to get acclimated. But what are your thoughts going into this game?
I think it's should be a pretty interesting matchup. This is, I think, the third year in a row that the Patriots have faced the Dolphins for the first week. So it should be kind of pretty interesting. The first time they won with Cam Newton as a quarterback. Second time they lost with the late fumble with Damian Harris when they were going. They're going to obviously probably score and win the game. So it should be interesting what happens for this kind of third game. I think it'll be a pretty good matchup between the two teams. The Patriots have a lot of different question marks that a lot of people have. Not so much for us, I think, as some of the other media. And then the Dolphins, everyone is kind of really high on this year, even though I don't really see some of the reasons for it. You have a new coach coming in. You have Tua as the quarterback. Those two are the big question marks for me. You can have 5 million great receivers. If you don't have the quarterback or the coach, it's not going to work. So I think those are the kind of the two big things for me that I think we're going to talk about in a little bit. Just kind of the head coaching situation and Tua, and kind of comparing the quarterback situation for both teams. You have Tua and Mac, both young quarterbacks. How is both quarterback ascending? Is one better than the other? And kind of what our thoughts on that.
No, I agree. And I think just going to the first topic of head coach, we talked about this on some of our off-season podcast episodes. I think the head coach is for Dolphins especially, is one of the biggest question marks in the NFL as a whole. I know they had some off-season additions where they added Tyreek Hill, one of the best wide receivers in football. They added Armstead, one of the best offensive tackles in the NFL. But in my opinion, I think Brian Flores was a top 5 coach in the NFL, and you moved on from him to get Mike McDaniel, who was a uprising offensive coordinator. But with him, he doesn't have any experience as a head coach, so he could be a really good head coach as well. We've seen some, such as Sean McVay, who's young, became head coach and had very good success and is a good coach. Or since he's just really an unknown, he could be like Brandon Staley, who's, in our opinion, one of the worst coaches in the NFL, who cost the Chargers, in their instance, some wins last year and had them not make the playoffs. So you don't really know what you're getting into. He's definitely a very bright football mind, but people said the same thing about Brandon Staley too. So it's just a really big uncertainty, especially going from such a good head coach, in our opinion, to just more of an unknown.
And another thing with him too is there's some sort of appeal right now with that Shanahan coaching tree, and you see it with all these coaches around the league. There's McVay, there's LaFleur, there's Staley, and then there's the Bengals coach Taylor. All 4 coaches that come from that Shanahan West Coast offensive style, and there's that big kind of drive for teams to kind of look that way, and even something that the Patriots are trying to influence a little bit more with their offense. It's a little bit harder to defend if you can execute really well with it, and it's a little bit more simpler than some of the other type of offensive schemes. So there is that kind of appeal for different teams to say, oh, can we grab someone from this? And it's kind of really how a lot of teams view Patriots coaches back in the day, where you'd be like, oh, it really works for New England. Let's try and grab anything we can there. Let's get their GM or their coach and see if it works. Eventually, not all these guys are going to work out. So what's going to happen with McDaniel? He seems pretty smart, but he also seems pretty awkward. And I don't really see how he can command a room, but maybe he can. And not all of these coaches are going to hit. So you don't know. It's a very big unknown, like you said. So until he proves something, I'm not going to give him the benefit of the doubt.
No, I agree completely. Like I said, I think he could be a really good head coach he definitely seems intelligent, but it's just an unknown.
Mhm. Moving on really to the next kind of big thing, like we talked about, the wide receivers. They've got Tyreek Hill, that was an addition. They have Waddle, that's a really speedy, explosive wide receiver.
Yeah.
And they have a couple other receivers that
Yeah, they have
are pretty
Cedric
decent.
Wilson. They have Mike Gesicki, their tight end, which sort of a little bit of a question mark because Mike Gesicki is one of the best tight ends in football, or maybe not one of the best, but top seven probably. But there were concerns or rumors that the Dolphins were looking to trading him just because since he's more of a wide receiver lined up at tight end and isn't really a blocker in the Shanahan type of offense, you need someone that can also block too. So it's interesting to see how he really fits into their scheme. If they're going to change the scheme a little bit to play to his strengths, or if he's going to kind of not see the field as much because of it or not be as productive.
Mm-hmm. And I think one thing that really kind of works out for the Patriots instance this way is we've talked a little bit during the offseason podcast and the podcast we've had with Matt Chatham that they are deep at wide receiver. They've got 3, 4, 5 guys that can even touch the ball. And this is where it may actually work out with the Patriots and the speed that they've added this offseason and held on to. Jonathan Jones has historically done really well against Tyreek Hill. So that's one guy you can have, right off the bat, he can be the one covering him. Plus, you got Marcus Jones, you got Jack Jones, and you have all the different safeties out there where that's what you can do to try and line up. You can maybe put Marcus Jones on Waddle, and then you can kind of figure it out in between there, have different double coverages, different zone schemes to try and block this out. This would be, I think, a really good test just to see kind of that different speed that the Patriots have this year and how it's going to match up with the Dolphins and really how it may be a little bit more beneficial for them by not having. It's never beneficial to lose a top cornerback, but the way that they want to go and try and solve that by having these different younger guys that are faster and they may not be an A, they may be more of a B player, but they have a lot more of those than last year where you had practice squad guys running out there at the end, where you had Juwan Williams and they had 1 or 2 different practice squad cornerbacks on there. So you had really C's and D's other than JC Jackson. So how is it going to look this time? I think it's a good test. And again, it's not something where we have to kind of say this is, we kind of feel this too. And something that Bill feels is that the first few games are kind of an extension of the preseason. And Matt talked about this last episode where just the amount of practice situations that you get in training camp right now is about probably half the amount of snaps you would see 10 years ago or 15 years ago.
Yeah, so I think even less than that.
Yeah. So they don't have the amount of practice that they used to have. So it's not going to look completely sharp going into this game. And they're going to do a lot of things scheme wise to try and make it look as good as possible. But we're not going to see the full-fledged Patriots defense or offense for probably 4 or 5 weeks. And that's something that happens historically. It happens with really every team. So it's not just a Patriot thing. No team is going to be looking the way that they're going to look in September as they do in October versus November versus December. And where you want to really be peaking is that November, December timeline. So it should be interesting. But again, I wouldn't put too much stock in, let's say they get the doors blown off. I wouldn't be overly concerned yet.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I think specifically for the wide receiver versus Patriots secondary, adding Tyreek Hill, even Cedric Wilson, it's definitely going to put a little pressure on the Patriots just because secondary isn't as, you don't have that JC Jackson, but as you were saying, as Matt said, you might not necessarily need him. You definitely get a lot faster where you have speed that can cover some of these guys. And then you also have a very strong safety group that some of the safeties can play corners. Some of them might play some 3 or 4 safety schemes as well to throw the quarterback off a little bit. So I think they should be okay, but it definitely is going to be a tough test for the Patriots just to start the season going for this secondary going up against that wide receiver group.
I think kind of moving on to the next topic with Tua, this really also will really, I think, could possibly help the Patriots where you have these wide receivers, but you have the quarterback to hit the throws that are necessary.
Exactly.
And we've seen last year, we've watched Tua now, 3 years and or 2 years. So we know really kind of what he is. And I know Josh Allen took the extra step after in his 3rd year, but Tua is not gaining the arm strength. Josh always had arm strength. That's not something that he had to deal with. He had to learn about learning the whole offense and learning to kind of control his throws and know what to do and process different things. Two is a completely separate situation where he I feel like he lacks the arm strength that's really necessary. He can't really get the ball in there really after those 15-yard throws. And those in cuts that he has, those quick slants, he's actually really good at. And
Yeah,
we saw it. They
he
beat
killed the Patriots
he
last
killed the
year with those
Patriots
quick
last year on
slants.
it when Mills or any of the corners were off the wide receiver, and they killed him anytime that they needed yardage. They'd go for that 5-yard in cut, and that's something he was good at. He's got a quick release. He could hit those. It's not really a hard throw. I could even probably throw it hard enough to get in there.
I want to go that far, but
But it's really those throws where you want to use the speed of the wide receivers that you have, and if you want to have Hill try and run a go route or a deep post, is he going to be able to hit that throw to have him in stride and actually have him get some yardage off of it? I'm not so sure. I don't really think he can.
yeah,
And again, Hill is his own breed where maybe you don't try and do those throws. Maybe you keep doing those in cuts and just try and see if he burns people. But you could scheme against that too, where you have people clog the middle of the field and that would prevent it. So eventually you have to take advantage of Hill's speed or Waddle's speed or Wilson's speed. And can he do it? I don't think he can. And I think that's what we're going to see this year. If Tua cannot succeed this year, they're going to move on for him because if he can't succeed this year, he can't succeed ever.
Yep. No, I agree completely. And I think the way that Tua has burned the Patriots in the past, like you said, is the quick slants, and the Patriots cornerback or secondary and linebackers just weren't fast enough to cover them. Part of the reason why they were just getting exposed with that. I think this is where Patriots secondary this year can be a little strength for them in this situation is they now have the speed at both cornerback as well as having some additional safeties, getting Jabril Peppers who can also play in the box, having faster linebackers where you can kind of clog the middle of the field and take away those quick slants where you might be able to get away with a few here and there, but you might be throwing the ball into just congestion and you might be able to get a pick or just not succeed in getting much at all. So I think it'll be interesting to see. I know we talked about this on the offseason as well as adding Tyreek Hill. His style doesn't really seem to fit Tua, which is why I don't see at the addition of Tyreek Hill as being as big of an effect as some people are, hence why people are picking the Dolphins to do really well this year. It's not like the Josh Allen got Tyreek Hill added to their offense or the Bengals got Tyreek Hill added to Joe Burrow. It's going to a quarterback that his skill isn't really the deep go pass. So it's going to be interesting to see. Maybe Tua really improved this offseason and is getting on the same page, but I'll believe it when I see it. I'm not too optimistic that that's the case. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how they gel together.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of leads on to the next topic, Mac Jones. This is really, they're very similar, both Alabama players, and kind of came out the one after the other, right? Or was Jalen Hurts after
Hurts transferred, and then Hurts and Tua came out the same year, and then Mac came out the year after.
All right. So you have kind of the tale of two quarterbacks. Which one in the same division? So which quarterback is going to be the better quarterback drafted from Alabama? We already knew last year coming out of the draft, all the Alabama receivers, when asked which quarterback they'd rather have, was Mac Jones. So
even Waddle said that.
Yeah. And after even watching the two of them last year, I would have said the same thing. And going into this year again, I think Mac, he's bound for his second year leap. And again, a lot of people were like, "Oh, can he really do it with this offensive change? When the offensive line the way it is, does he have the weapons?" And I think we've just seen already from him going into this year, just his leadership is even more than it was last year. He's more vocal than before.
Yeah.
And I think he has the intangibles that are really needed to kind of take that step forward and also lead the team. He may not be someone that's throwing 50 touchdowns or anything like that, but I think he has the traits that are necessary to do well really this year and do well against the Dolphins and kind of step up where right now there may be some things that the team needs to work on. The offensive line may need some work just to gel and kind of get used to each other because they don't have as much practice time. So they really are probably going to have to put a little bit more in Mac's hands the first few weeks, just because they may not be able to get the running game going if the offensive line isn't melding. Because if you don't have a good offensive line going at the time, you're not going to have a running game, no matter how good your running back is. And they've
Yep.
got two really good running backs. So depending on how that line looks the first few weeks, and I think it may look a little shaky just because they need time to practice. I don't think they're going to be bad the whole year, but I think it's going to take a little bit of time to gel. So the key kind of X factor here is how is Mac Jones going to play? Is he going to rise to the occasion, step up? But I think he will. We saw him last year against the Dolphins get killed.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know how many times he was hit, but it was an insane amount. And he kept driving through it and he kept throwing under pressure and he was able to do it. And something we've seen a lot from him. And I think that Bills game just showed how much stones that the guy has. That again, they got their rocks blown off of them. But him and Bourne were the only two competing really on the Patriots.
Yep.
And just to see that fire, I don't really have any doubts that he's going to be able to help lead this team. And I think he's definitely the better quarterback of the two.
No, I agree completely. I think the thing that impressed me most last year was there were some games where he had a pretty bad first half, but he didn't have any games where he was awful the entire game. Some people you might see they have an off day and then they can't right the ship. Whereas even Josh Allen, who's top 5 quarterback in the NFL, maybe top 3, there were some games where against Jacksonville he was just horrendous all day.
Mm-hmm.
But Mac, he might have had a bad first half versus the Colts, but he always came around. He never gave up and just was. So that's the thing that impressed me the most, that even if he started off bad, he was always able to right the ship. And that's something that is very encouraging, especially for a young quarterback. So I believed in him. I wanted him, even when Mac was a senior coming out of Alabama. And I'm very high on him, and I think he'll have a good year. And I think this first matchup versus the Dolphins is going to be interesting because they do have a very good secondary. So it'll be interesting to see how he does versus them, especially with the inconsistencies that the Patriots offense has shown so far in training camp and the preseason. But I think he's going to have a pretty good game, and I think he's going to have a good year.
Yeah, it will be really interesting to kind of see there. And kind of going into the next topic would just be the running back situation with the Dolphins going against the Patriots. This would be actually, I think, kind of pretty interesting, just because we'll get into a little bit later on, just kind of concerns that we have overall. The Patriots did not really have a good run defense last year, and they didn't really do anything to change that. So they didn't change anything at defensive tackle.
Yeah.
And they re-signed, they extended Godchow. So basically, because that's really all they really have going forward. And I think the big key here would be kind of how Christian Barmore acts. He played a lot more in preseason as a 3-down defensive tackle. Is that something where he's going to be able to help with the run? Is it going to be the different scheme that they have? What are they going to do to stop the run here? And that's going to be a pretty interesting thing, just because the Dolphins have some pretty good running backs. They've always been really deep at the running back position. And depending on how this Shanahan style offense comes with McDaniel, the zone scheme running game, if you have everything schemed the right way and if they're executing it, it's kind of hard to defend too. So how is that going to work? How is it going to look? I am a little concerned at that aspect, just because they never did anything last year to stop the run. There are instances where they had one drive where they had to stop it. They knew they had to stop it and they couldn't stop it.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen this year? And I don't know. It could be better. It could be worse. Could be the same. But that's a big question mark there.
No, I think that's a fair point. And I think part of it might be they might be changing the scheme a little bit. We saw a little more in the preseason of 4 defensive linemen.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be something where their scheme, it fits a little better if you have 2 defensive tackles and Dietrich Wise outside instead of having Wise as a 3-4 D end.
Mm-hmm.
So that might help. Also, they did get faster at linebacker. They are smaller, but with that speed, they might be able to shoot the gap quicker and stop the running back faster as well. Along with if Christian Barmore is able to step up in the run game, that might be something too. The good thing is the Dolphins do have some quality running backs with Edmonds and Mostert. I can never pronounce his name. Mostert.
I don't know. It's
Yeah,
something like
but
that.
Mostert and then Miles Gaskin.
Mhm.
They're not any of the top 10 running backs, but they have 3 quality running backs. Along with having the Shanahan offense, so that's going to give them some troubles, but it's not like they're going up against Derrick Henry. So it's going to be a good challenge this first week going up against 3 different running backs, but hopefully it's I guess it is one of the concerns for the Patriots. How's their run defense going to perform this year?
And then just another thing, just to add on this, and this isn't really related to the running scheme, but just something to add again on Tua. This is 3 years in a row he's had a new offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
So everyone tries to harp on the Patriots having Matt Patricia be the offensive coordinator and all the change that's happening. This is, and no one seems, everyone's all really kind of not really mentioning anything about Tua in that situation.
Yeah.
And they're going from different schemes. It's
Yeah.
not like they're going from the same playbook to just have a different offensive coordinator like the Patriots are doing. They have a different scheme year after year. They had the Patriots scheme the first year. Flores fired Chad O'Shea because they said the offense was too complicated to teach. So then they went to whatever scheme they went the next year. And now they're going to that Shanahan style. So that's just something to add on to there.
No, that's a fair point.
All right. Kind of vice versa now. Pat's running back and O-line versus the Dolphins defensive front. Again, like I said before, they've had some issues with the offensive line in preseason. It's not something that I think is going to be a very, very quick fix. I think it'll be pretty quick in the first, at least after the first couple games, they'll get used to it after seeing more practice and having more game speed situations. But I think the first couple games, they're going to have a little bit of trouble establishing the run, and especially too against the Dolphins front. I think it's actually semi decent. It's not the top defensive line in the league, but it's also not one of the worst ones. So I think it could be a little bit of a challenge there as well.
No, I agree. I think part of it is also just going to be health of the Patriots O-line as well, which we've seen in the training camp and preseason that they had some struggles. Part of it because Patriots are transitioning more towards a zone running, which they haven't really done as much before. And it just takes a little time to get used to that, along with you need to get the reps. And Isaiah Wynn has been out a little bit. And I think that's just one of the concerns for the Patriots O-line for this whole season in general is just the health of it, which we'll get into a little later. But is Trent Brown going to be healthy? Is Isaiah Wynn going to be healthy? How's Cole Strange going to hold up as a rookie? So I think they'll be okay. It's going to be interesting to see this first week or two, especially with you have really good running backs. Is the offensive line going to be able to hold up enough that where they can at least get some runs, break through some 4 or 5 yard carries, maybe break a couple 10, 15-yard carries here and there. In the preseason, when they were when they ran not the zone runs, just the traditional ones, they were able to break away with some. So it's going to be interesting to see. But that is a big question mark. If the Patriots running backs are able to get some yards, that's going to open up the play action. It's going to open up the offense. If they're just getting stuffed every single play, Mac's going to have to throw. Patriots are going to become more one-dimensional, and it's going to be a tough challenge, especially with the Dolphins secondary. So it's just another uncertainty, especially with it being week 1 with us not really knowing how they're going to perform.
Exactly. Now we've talked about Tua, the head coach, wide receivers, running backs, offensive line. Going to get into the predictions now. I've got them 23-17 Patriots winning.
I have 27-20 Patriots, but it's not as close as the score indicates. I say Dolphins score late
touchdown at the end. Okay, I could see that.
And I think it's going to send the message early that the Patriots aren't as bad as most of the media is saying. Their roster doesn't stink. They're not in a rebuild, as some prominent members are saying. So I think it's going to at least be encouraging. But we'll see. Mm-hmm. They beat them with Cam Newton 2 years ago. They lost with Mac Jones last year. So you never really know, especially with these division games.
Exactly. And Patriots right now are actually not favored in this game. The
Yeah, I'm not
Dolphins are
surprised.
favored by 3 points, which is actually basically a draw if you
Yeah,
think
I'm
about it.
I'm surprised it's that close. I thought it would have been more.
So usually the home team gets a 3 point advantage. So that's actually technically really a draw, but I would have the Patriots here.
And playing in Miami is actually one of the more real home field advantages.
True. All right, so now we never really had our season preview last week with Matt Chatham. This is a couple things that we wanted to get to on top of the stuff that we had talked about with him. And again, if you haven't checked that episode out, I'd really give that a good listen. Matt had some really good insight during that episode. A lot of different things that you don't usually get to hear coming from an ex-player. So really good insight on training camp, kind of the offensive coordinator situation, and kind of how things are divulged from the team perspective. And then he had some good insight as well on the offensive defensive kind of breakdowns for the Patriots and how things are looking, and may not be looking as bad as some people are saying. And he kind of gave an anti Patriots stink roster. He said that the Patriots are actually a pretty good roster. They're not great. They're not bad. They're better than average. So, and I think that's something that Eric and I agree with, that it doesn't stink, and it's going to be a little bit better than some people think. Going on to the season preview. So just a couple kind of quick hitter things, kind of really accolade sort of things. The three biggest strengths. I can go first.
Okay.
I say the safety group, pass rush, and Mac Jones. So safety group, I think we've talked about this a few times. They've got a whole bunch of talent in the safety group. It's obviously their strongest position group out of every single one. And it's going to be really interesting this year just to see how they use all of those safeties, because they have different roles, different responsibilities. A lot of them could play different routes on the field. They could be linebackers. They could be slot corners. They could be the free safety. They could really be anything. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they use them. And they have a lot of versatility there. Pass rush. That's something where Matthew Judon and Christian Barmore, we saw a lot of last year until the end of the season, where they kind of got worn down. And I think it's going to be another thing where they succeed this year. And I think Matthew Judon has said before he got worn down and he wasn't in shape for the end of the year, and he didn't have the ability to withstand the whole season, and he changed his kind of workout scheme. So how is that going to work? I think it's going to work a little bit better. He's acknowledged kind of what went wrong last year. So I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that he's going to correct that and be in better shape for the rest of the year. Plus, it seems like they do have some other talent to go on the opposite side of him. Anthony Jennings is looking really well, Josh Uche. And then Mac Jones. I think he's a really big piece of the puzzle here. Mac is one of the smarter quarterbacks in the league. He can do a lot with his intelligence, his breakdown of the defensive scheme, and his leadership is going to be really important. So I think that's a really big strength going forward.
I think those are all fair points. For me, safety is my number one. Don't really have to say too much more than what you said, other than just you have three safeties last year that were on the field more than 70% of the time, with McCourty, Duggar, Phillips. I think Duggar takes another step forward this year. And then you also added Jabril Peppers, one of the more versatile players in the NFL. You also have Josh Bledsoe, who has emerged at camp this year. And then even Miles Bryant can play some safety. You also have Marcus Jones as well, Sean Wade, that can play some safety too. So that's by far the biggest strength. Definitely. Running back is second, where you have Damian Harris and you have Ramondre Stevenson. Damian Harris ran for almost 1,000 yards last year and 15 touchdowns. Stevenson, in only about 2/3 of the games, I think, ran for 650 yards and 5 touchdowns. So you have that two-headed monster of Stevenson and Harris. And as long as they stay healthy, I think they'll be able to pound the running game and do well. And number 3 is just special teams, where I know overall the special teams unit wasn't great last year. Nick Folk was just money every single time. And I'm expecting him to be the same. He pretty much has been since he signed with the Patriots. Jake Bailey 2 years ago was all pro. He was my Patriots MVP for the 2020 season, which is sad that Punter was MVP. But so far, it looked like it was more injury that was plaguing him last year. And he's looked well in camp and preseason. And then last year, Nick Folk was my MVP. So special team player was your team MVP back-to-back years. But then also you have Matthew Slater, you have Brandon Schooler, who's looked really well. So I think if you have a field kicker that's pretty much money every single time, you know that even if you're not able to get a touchdown, if you just drive the field a little bit, you're going to get points, a lot of drives. So that's why special teams is one of my 3 strengths.
It makes a lot of sense, and good thing that they held on to Bailey there, where they didn't do what we wanted to do, and that's all we'll really have to say there. 3 biggest concerns for the Patriots. I think we're going to have pretty similar ones here: offensive line, corners, and run defense for me. So again, offensive line, I think, like we had kind of talked about with Matt last week. They have the talent, and they've got some really good players there. It's just really how long is it going to take them to kind of gel and get molded into the right fit. So I think it's going to take a little bit of time. It's going to take at least a couple of weeks, I think, for them to kind of finally fit together. And then the other kind of situation is health overall. How is Trent Brown going to hold up? How's Wynn going to hold up? Because neither of them usually hold up throughout a whole season. And if they do, and they play at a high level, they're going to be fine. And I think it's just those kind of 2 big things: health of the offensive line. How long is it going to take them to gel? I don't have a really concern of the players' ability for really any of them, but just those kind of 2 things are the 2 biggest ones. Corners, like we said, they did lose JC Jackson, and it is a big unknown. We've seen a lot in what preseason training camp with kind of what these rookies look like and how everything's kind of melding together. Jonathan Jones on the outside. And it is a big unknown. We think it's going to be fine, and I think they're going to do really well, but we also don't know. We could be wrong. They may not be that good. They may take a while to kind of get ready and get acclimated to the NFL or playing the different positions. So it's just, I think, a big unknown there too, where it's something that we think could be really useful for them, but they may not be that kind of cohesive at the beginning. And then just the last thing, the run defense, like I mentioned before, they got run over the entire season last year. Are they going to change that? They didn't change really much for the roster for that situation. So how are they going to affect that? Is Godchow going to play better? Is Barmore going to be allowed to play against the run this year, where he was usually used more often as just a sub pass rusher in that situation? So what's that going to look like? And those would be kind of the 3 concerns there.
Yeah, for me, number 1, offensive line, where part of it is just the shakiness that they've shown so far in training camp preseason, but more of it's just the health of the team overall, where Trent Brown's now your starting left tackle. Last 3 seasons, he's played 25 games. He's missed 24 games. Isaiah Wynn on the other side, first 3 seasons, he's missed about 15 games over the last 3 seasons. So you have 2 guys that at both tackle positions just haven't been able to stay healthy. You have a little bit of depth there, but at backup tackles, but not really anyone I'd be comfortable throwing out there 8-9 games for the season, unless it's Michael Onwenu moving to tackle. So that's just my concern: is are they going to be able to stay healthy? Second one's cornerback, like you said, it's just without them having JC Jackson, is Jonathan Jones able to really step up? Are the collective group overall able to make up for not having a number 1 cornerback? Number 3 is just linebackers, where you did get faster, but you're relying on some people that you haven't really had to rely on before. Is Mac Wilson, who was kind of shipped out of Cleveland, is he going to be able to continue showing what he's shown so far? Sanford Jennings is going to be able to stay healthy. Is Josh Uche going to be able to take that next step? Raekwon McMillan. So it's just more concerns. I think they'll be okay as long as they all stay healthy, but that's my biggest concerns.
Okay. Next one, just be X factors. So 1 X factor for the offense, 1, and then we'll do defense. So I'll start with offense first. Again, I'd say offensive line. So the offensive line really kind of controls everything. If it plays really well, if everyone's healthy, or even if everyone's not healthy, but as long as they play really well, that sets up the running game, and the running game sets up the passing game. So if you know that you can run the ball, then the defense can't sell out for the pass or vice versa. So I think the offensive line really kind of will control how the season goes. So as long as they're able to protect Mac and also establish the run, this offense is going to be pretty well. I think they were a top 5 scoring offense last year, a top 6, and they can obviously do at least the same this year, if not better. But it may be a little bit harder this year just in the AFC, just because there's so many more offensive talents in the AFC this year. But they should be around the same spot.
Yeah, for me, I think that is the important one. For me, I went with Jonnu Smith just because you paid him a lot last year. He underperformed significantly. It looked like after that Saints game, he was just thinking too much. Everything was in his head. But he had a really good camp, really good preseason, and it seems that the Patriots are invested in him and they think the same thing, that he'll be able to perform because they just restructured his contract to free up cap space, but it's going to give him a bigger cap hit the next 2 years. So 2 or 3 years. So if he does underperform, you're not going to be able to really move on from him. Granted, he's only, I think, 26 now. He had a really good season with the Titans the year before where he had 8 touchdowns. He's very versatile. If he's able to live up to the contract he signed, and you're able to have the 2 tight ends, him and Henry, assuming Henry stays healthy, that's really going to open up this offense where if Mac has 2 tight ends and then you have 2 or 3 wide receivers, that running backs coming out of the backfield, it's going to be a lot tougher for defenses to really hone up on one specific position. And if he's able to, I'm not saying it's going to be as good as the 2010, 2011 Patriots offense where you had Gronk and Hernandez, but that type of offense where those 2 tight ends opens up the rest of the offense.
Yep, I could see that being one as well. Defense, I've got a kind of combination because it's really the 2 players that are going to play opposite of Matthew Judon, which would be Anthony Jennings and Josh Uche. I think if these 2 players are able to play really well and play kind of how they've shown in the preseason, I think the pass rush is going to be kind of really dominating because not only do you have to worry about Matthew Judon and Christian Barmore, you have the other side where you have to worry about as well. So that way you kind of can't, you have to kind of pick your poison where you're going to want to go. If Jennings is playing as fast as he is this preseason, and if Uche is able to kind of take the next step and able to kind of defend the run as well, I think they're going to be pretty set up for a lot of success, especially with kind of their corner situation. You can mask a deficiency in corners if you have a pass rush. And we saw that last year as well. When they had the pass rush, they were able to play zone more often in the defense because you don't have as much time to throw the ball. So you don't have to worry about someone being covered man to man the whole time. So that's where the zone really works really well if you have a pass rush. And if they're able to maintain that pass rush, that's something they could do again this year, since they don't have that really lockdown corner. So I think that's really the big part of the defense that will make or kind of break them.
I think that's a good pick. I almost went with Anthony Jennings for that same reason, but I ended up going with Jabril Peppers just because he hasn't played much this training camp preseason just because he's coming back from injury, but he is one of the most versatile players in the NFL. He's able to play safety. He's able to play corner, slot corner, outside corner. He's able to come up in the box as a linebacker. He's fast. He's big. He's strong. So he's someone that even if you have some deficiencies, the linebackers aren't as good as you're expecting, or cornerback, the rookies aren't able to take that next step, or they're struggling a little bit. You can move him into those different positions and fill up some of those deficiencies. And as long as he stays healthy, if he's able to play up to that potential, I think that's going to be something that's really going to help this offense or help this defense. And then also along those factors, it's tougher for quarterbacks to really understand the scheme that the Patriots defense is really running, where you see him on the field. He might be lined up in the box, but he's actually going to be cornerback in zone, or he might be all over the field, and it's going to be tougher for the quarterback to decipher what he's really looking at the defense.
Yep. Yeah, I can see that too. That makes a lot of sense. It'll just be interesting to see, is he used as much just because he wasn't used too much in the preseason? Is it going to be something where it takes a little bit of time to ramp him up?
Yeah.
Are they kind of hiding a little bit? Or what's
Well, he was coming back from a major injury,
yeah.
But I thought since he also didn't play as much, I was worried that as the preseason went on that he might be a surprise cut. But
that makes sense. All right, moving on for kind of some more predictions. Patriots MVP. I've got Michael McCorkle-Jones. I think if this team does really well, it's going to be a lot on the shoulders of him, and he's going to be the one to kind of lay it all out there for him.
No, same with me. I think he takes that next step. I don't know if he takes a year two leap like Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow did, but I think it's a similar type of leap where he's going to be in the conversation of being a top 10 quarterback this year.
All right. Patriots offensive player of the year. We've got kind of similar ones here.
Yeah.
I've got Hunter Henry. I think he's kind of Mac Jones' favorite target. He had a bunch of touchdown receptions last year. He's one of his favorite guys to go to when he's under pressure, when he's looking for a touchdown, when he needs a guy to have reception. It's him and Myers. And I think just because he's a better player than Myers, I'm going to go with Hunter Henry.
Yeah, as long as he turns his head around enough on those out routes.
Yeah, I think that's something where with Mac being in his second year, that's something he's going to get on him more in practice.
I think so too.
It's something where if Brady was here, he would have been laying into him the entire time from not turning his head. That's something that did drive me nuts last year with Hunter Henry, where he does too much to try and kind of get free and he's not paying attention as much. But I think that is something you can easily solve. And I think something with Mac being a little bit more vocal this year, that's something he could say, hey, you need to keep turning. We need 3 yards. You can't be trying to out juke someone and make 5 different moves to try and get open. You have to be ready for the ball. Yeah. And I think that's something that he will do this year.
I think that, and also second year being in the system, second year having Mac Jones, where getting that timing, getting that understanding of where just of what's needed for each play. I think that getting that chemistry, I think it'll be a little better. Mine, I went same position, but I went with Jonnu Smith, where I think he's really going to have a breakout season this year. I think he's going to live up to potential. He's going to spread this offense out. You might see him coming out of the backfield, see some wide receiver or tight end runs or line up as fullback sometimes. I think he's going to live up to the potential, and that's just going to, I think he's going to have a big season. Granted, I thought he was going to have a big season last year too. That didn't pan out, so we'll see. But
hopefully he's got a good season going on. Defensive player of the year. I've got Christian Barmore. So I think this really goes up to him having an increase in snap count. And we did see last year his snap count went up higher and higher, but they didn't really use him as much against the run. As we know, Patriots did run about 75% of their defensive formations, not in base, so in nickel or different sub packages. So that isn't too uncommon with them. But I think this coming year, we did see it a little bit more in the preseason. I think he kind of held up pretty well, and him taking that second leap for an NFL player as well. I think Barmore is going to be he's going to be a 3-down player. And if he's able to succeed there, he's going to be a fantastic player. He's a great pass rusher. If he's able to hold up against the run, you're going to be talking about him. He's probably not going to be Aaron Donald, but he's going to be someone like that, where it's someone you can trust. He's playing 3 downs. He's a really good pass rusher. I think he's going to take that next step forward and just be that more dominant, because then you have to worry about him the entire time against the pass. So, and then you have that kind of 2-headed monster, him and Judon, and then maybe Jennings too, or Uche or someone like that.
No, I think that's a good pick, and I think Christian Barmore is going to be a problem this year.
Yeah.
But I think one thing with him last year that a lot of people didn't realize is he got the most second teams and third teams of any interior lineman in the NFL last year, and he was still able to be as productive as he was. So I think he has a good season coming up. I went with Matthew Judon just because the first half of the last year, he was in the conversation. He probably wouldn't have gotten it just because of the Patriots defense, but in my opinion, he was in the conversation at least for defensive player of the year, just with how productive he was. I think he is going to be similar this year, just he doesn't have that second half downturn. He might not be as productive the entire season, or as productive as he was the first half, because he might have seen how he wore himself out, but I think he's still going to be very productive. I think he'll get 10, 15 plus sacks this year and be disruptive the entire season. So that I'm going with him.
Yeah, I could see that. I think that he's really is between him and Judon. I figured you were probably going to go with Judon because it's the obvious one. So I think Barmore is just another one where he could take that next step forward and be a big key to this Patriots defense. And I think he's really trying to show people that he doesn't have issues off the field.
Yeah.
Going on, most improved. I'm going to go with he's someone I've talked a bunch about this podcast, Anthony Jennings. I think
that's who I had. I picked him in one of our previous episodes as who I thought was going. Yeah, you did.
Yeah, I thought it was a little ridiculous, but everything I've seen from this training camp, he's really kind of surprised me, and I'm giving him credit where credit's due. He looks like a better player, and this is something we did talk about a few episodes ago, where he is the product of the 2020 draft, where rookies that were rookies in 2020, when they go into the 2021 season, that's still kind of their rookie year because their 2020 year wasn't a real rookie year. They didn't have all the in-person things that they could do. They didn't get that much teaching. They were kind of left to really kind of fend for themselves, and it wasn't really a good year for them. And I think that's something where we're kind of seeing that now with Jennings, where he did take a huge step forward from even last year. And I think they've really kind of found what position works best for him, where his rookie year, you didn't really know what he was. Was he a middle linebacker? Was he an edge guy? Was he a 3-point technique defensive lineman? They didn't really know what he was. Was he an outside linebacker? And I think they've really found a good spot for him. And that's something that Bill's really good with, taking something that a player is good at and using those skills there. So I think they put him in a better position to succeed. And I think just that extra year with the Patriots last year, even being on IR, really helped him kind of learn the ins and outs of the team and what really goes on with that. So I think he's going to have a much better year. Well, obviously than last year because he didn't play, than the year before. So he wasn't good at all his rookie year. And you could tell he was slow. I thought he was the type of linebacker that the game's going away from. But again, he played at Alabama. Any player that plays there is usually going to be pretty good. So I think we're kind of seeing that now.
Yeah, and I think the thing with him also is just this whole offseason, training camp, preseason, he's been healthy. I think that's the biggest thing for him, where he's been able to get those practice reps. He's been able to take the most out of them. And sometimes it's tough to judge a player their rookie year. I remember Dante Hightower's rookie year. You, me, our dad were just, whenever he was on the field, especially in coverage, we were like, get him off the field. He wasn't good. Mm-hmm. And then he became one of the staples for this defense for almost a decade. So I know he came from Alabama to the NFL. Same with Jennings. Sometimes it's a little bit of transition, especially at that linebacker position. I had a feeling you were going to go with Jennings, so I just went a little outside the box. I went with Jalen Mills. He was a starting cornerback for you last year, but he's really seen to take that next step this season in this defense, especially taking that number one cornerback role. He doesn't have that top end speed, which is still a little bit of a limitation for him. But if you're playing more zone schemes, which I think they're going to be this year, it'll be playing into his strength. And I think he's going to have a good year.
I think that's a really good spot too. And the only thing I would kind of push back about would be most improved, where he actually last year sneakily he got better and better as the year went on. I think he was also kind of helped out by that they're going to that zone scheme. He's a much better zone corner than he is a man, just because of that speed element. But
that's fair.
Even again with man, he's looked a lot better with that this year, and that is something they could scheme up against. If there's someone that he can't run toe to toe with, they can always put someone over the top and kind of cover that guy, so he's not going to get burned. And that's something they're really good at. They know what their player is best at, and if it's something that if he can't shadow the guy, or maybe they'll put him on their second or third guy and then have someone else cover them and have a man over the top or something like that. So that's something they're pretty good at scheming, and he looks like he's just a lot more comfortable this year.
100%.
Just the last thing with the Patriots before we get just really one thing around the NFL someone will love to talk about. Patriots predictions, win-loss. We're not going to go game by game like some idiots out there. But what do you see the win-loss record? And again, this is a complete prediction, something like Matt said, you don't really know what's going to happen. I'm going to say 11-6. And I think just kind of looking at it, they won 10 games last year. They're going to do at least the same, I would say. I think they're going to take another step forward. Mac is going to do a little bit better. And I say 11-6 would be a good conservative estimate. I would not be shocked if there was plus or minus one win either way. So if it was 10-7 or if it was 12-5,
No,
even better.
I think that's a fair point. And for me, I've been going back and forth. I actually changed my prediction
right
again.
now.
So last year they went 10-7 with the rookie quarterback. There were every single regular season game that they lost, they were one defensive stop away from at least having a chance to win it. And they just didn't get them. The AFC is a lot stronger this year. So that is going to be, at least on paper. So, and also this prediction's just assuming full health or no major injuries. But like the Raiders got better, Chargers got better. So it might be
Broncos
tougher to
better.
get to, what was that?
Broncos get better.
Broncos get better. Granted, you're not playing the Broncos and Chargers, but still for possibly making the playoffs, that might matter. I'm going 12-5. I think that they're going to be a lot better than people are expecting. I wouldn't be shocked if they go 10-7, 9-8. I'd be a little surprised, assuming there's no major injury. But I'm going 12-5. This team going into this season, it reminds me a lot of the going into the 2010 season where Patriots got blown out in the wild card round, and people were writing them off the team. They didn't assign any major free agents, but they drafted well that year. They drafted well the year before and had some people the year before that, similar to this team as well. Granted, you don't have Tom Brady, you have Mac Jones, but if Mac Jones is able to take that next step, your rookie class from last year is looking really good. Some players from the previous year, and Kyle Duggar, Anthony Jennings is looking really well. And then the rookie class so far this year has looked pretty good. Granted, you don't really know until you see them in the regular season on a football field, but I'm encouraged. I think the tough thing is you have some tough games the first 4 weeks, and then you have a pretty easy stretch. Then you have a really tough end of the season. But if you're rolling, and that might be something where you're hot, you're going up against a tough team, you might just have that momentum that carries you through. So I think they're going to have a pretty good year this year. I think my guess is they'll still not win the division. I think it's going to be 12-5, both them and the Bills. Bills win the division with a tiebreaker, but I think they're going to be a lot better than people expect.
I agree completely. I think they're going to be a lot better. Again, this roster does not stink like some people say. It's a good roster. They're pretty strong on offense. They're bringing back the same kind of offensive talent. They were top 5 offense last year, and
the only starters that they're not bringing back on offense is Ted Karras and Shaq Mason. And Michael Onwenu, he started about half your games on offensive line as well. So really, you're bringing back 10 of 11 starters on offense, along with a quarterback that's going into his second year, and you add Devontae Parker.
Yep, that's exactly what I was going to say. And if Tyquan Thornton can kind of kind of resume where he started in preseason, where he had a lot of chemistry with Mac. And if he kind of resumes that when he comes back off of injury, he should be back probably week 5 or week 6. That's going to just be another key to add to the offense. So
one more point on the offense that we haven't talked about and not many people have talked about. I think other than Jonnu Smith, one of the biggest surprises that can really help this offense succeed is Nelson Aguilar, which he didn't have a great season last year. I think he did some things that a lot of fans didn't realize, where he was able to open up the offense just because of his speed, where you had to have a cornerback and some safety covering the top. But him and Mac really worked together a lot this offseason. It seems like their chemistry has gotten a lot better. And I think if Mac is able to hit Aguilar on a lot of those deep routes, that's going to open up this offense even more, especially also if Jonnu Smith plays like I'm hoping for, where that's just going to, I think that could really be a difference maker too.
Yep. And just to touch on Aguilar too, one of the other reasons why he wasn't as successful last year is just one of two things. The offensive line last year wasn't great for, I would say, at least half the year. And Mac didn't have the time to throw those deep balls. So Aguilar didn't get to have as many throws for things that he's really good at, is those go routes, those deep posts, any of those kind of deeper runs to use his speed. And the other situation was Mac was a rookie quarterback, and they weren't trying to do too much with him. And it a little bit at some points they got a little bit too conservative for even, I think, both of our likings, where you could see the intangibles that Mac had last year, and even in the Buccaneer game where they could not run the ball to save their life.
Yeah.
And eventually they finally even gave up and like, we're going to let him throw the ball and see what it does. And he did really well.
Yeah.
So
he outplayed Brady.
He outplayed Brady, and they should have trusted him to go on fourth down instead of kicking that ball. And that's one thing, again, what they were probably a little bit too conservative with him, but I think they're gonna kind of unleash him a little bit more this year. It's his second year. He's not doesn't have those kid baby gloves on, and they're gonna have a little bit more out of him.
Yeah.
So I think both predictions are pretty much in the same ballpark. And again, I wouldn't be shocked if it was plus or minus one either way. But this is a pretty good team. I'm not saying they're going to win the Super Bowl or anything like that, but I think they're going to take another step forward.
Yep.
All right, moving on. Really quickly here, just to kind of talk about them because we can't ever get rid of them. It would be Jimmy Garoppolo. Re-signed, restructured his deal with the 49ers. It looked like all offseason he was going to be gone from the team. They kept saying they were going to trade him during the beginning of the offseason. He was not wanted by the team. He ended up having offseason surgery on his shoulder, which surprised the team. He had it kind of late, which they weren't happy with. They weren't able to trade him because no one wanted him coming off the shoulder injury because they weren't really sure what was going on. They wanted to see him play first. So by the time teams saw him play, everyone had their quarterback situation kind of all really settled. And again, the 49ers have a kind of a high expectation of what they can get for him, where I don't think they ever really lowered their expectations. And you saw what Baker Mayfield got for his trade, and the Browns had to eat a lot of the money, and they got, I think, an additional 5th round pick, and that's nothing. So obviously you're not going to get anything for Jimmy. So it makes sense for them why they're keeping him around. I think it's something they should have done a little bit earlier. But I think in this situation, Jimmy had to have gone around and found out no one was going to pay him what he wanted. No one was going to trade for him on his $24 million contract. That's for sure. No one was going to pay that. And then number two, if he forced them to cut him, no one was going to pay him what he really wanted. There's probably going to be a very incentive-laden contract with different stipulations, and maybe $3 million or $4 million. He was the 6.5 is actually a pretty good rate, especially for the other caveat where he has incentives that can boost it up an extra $7 million. And I think he's betting that Trey Lance isn't going to be the guy, and something's going to happen. He's either going to get hurt because he already got hurt last year after a game or two, or he's going to play really poorly because I don't think he's that good of a quarterback. And I think they're going to kind of really regret after this year. And they're going to blame it on his first year starting, and give him another year or two just to see what happens. But I don't think he's the quarterback for their future. And Jimmy always wins when he plays. So I think that's something that we really know about Jimmy. But again, I don't know. I really just wish he asked him to be cut and go somewhere else, because he kind of looks a little bit of a baby saying that he wanted to be content and not ruffle the feathers of everyone. So in the end, that was a long story short. He should demand to be cut.
I think one thing though, which it might work out in his favor, is if it's so far into the approaching the start of the season where if he was to go to, say, Seattle or Pittsburgh or just somewhere in specific or somewhere in general, he might not have enough time to really learn the offense playbook, and he might not perform well because of that. And that will hurt his financial incentives when he goes into free agency. He might not be able to get that contract, or might not be able to get a good contract because of it. At least if he stays in San Francisco, he knows Kyle Shanahan doesn't believe in Trey Lance. Granted, he doesn't believe in Jimmy G either, but he at least took them to the NFC Championship 2 out of the last 3 years. Should have made it to the Super Bowl this year. Should have won the Super Bowl 2 years ago if it wasn't for horrible coaching. So he at least knows he has the buy-in from the locker room too, whereas say the 49ers on paper are a very talented roster. If they start the season 1-3, 2-5, I can definitely see the leadership going to Shanahan, going to John Lynch saying, you have to play Jimmy. If
Mm-hmm.
not, we're not going to make the playoffs. And if we play Jimmy, we have a shot of making it to the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And then he could make those incentives back. So I think for him, it would have been best to go somewhere else. But I understand why he'd want to play, because staying here, at least for the next year, he at least can say that it wasn't my fault. I was coming back from injury.
Mm-hmm.
And you saw when he goes into free agency, he could say, you saw what I did making it to the NFC Championship 2 out of the 3 years.
Yeah.
One thing though is I wonder what it's going to do to Trey Lance too. Whereas when Bill decided he was going with Mac Jones, he cut Cam Newton because he didn't want a quarterback standing behind him. And you've seen that as well before when teams decide they're going to go with a young quarterback. If there's competition, they usually move on. There's one thing if it's a quarterback that's going to be mentoring, like a Brian Hoyer or Joe Flacco, but it's not someone that's competing for their job. So I wonder how that's really going to play into the factor. And that might be more of a problem than anything. And then if Trey Lance feels that he's not trusted, then he might want to get out of there, even though he has 2 more years left, or when his contract's up, might not want to sign because he doesn't have faith in that the organization has faith in him.
Yep. Yeah, I could definitely see that. And again, that's the thing where if he starts out poor, and I think I could definitely see that happening.
Yeah.
And like we've seen that too with the 49ers, when Jimmy Garoppolo is not the starting quarterback for that team, they don't play well. They have a below 500 record with any other quarterback they've tried out there. And Trey Lance isn't that good, I don't think. I think he's got a hell of an arm. He's got a cannon, but he can't do anything with it. He doesn't have the touch. He doesn't have the kind of the breakdown of the defense. He came from a weaker kind of division. So how is that going to look? How is he going to play? And honestly, the thing, like I said before, when Jimmy plays, Jimmy wins.
I think part of that's also having a very talented roster, but I think Jimmy's an above average quarterback. I don't think he's a top 10 quarterback, but I think he's been fortunate.
I don't think he's a top 10. I think he has the intangible. The winning is an intangible, I think, and it's something where he does the things that are necessary to win. And he's played enough games where he's got, I think, over a 70% or 75% winning record, which is insane. It's really high. And all he did, like he says, all you gotta do is win, baby. The great not Mark Davis, the former Raiders, Al Davis. So he's got that kind of thing. It's just you can't really describe what it is. And I think it was better when he started with the 49ers, where he really kind of took control, had those game-winning drives, had that it factor. And this Shanahan, there's something about him, doesn't trust Jimmy, and I don't get why. And I think he's really held him back, and kind of really something hurt Jimmy's development with the 49ers based on how Kyle treated him. I think part of it was just because he didn't want Jimmy, and he was basically given an offer he couldn't refuse. A 2nd-round pick for Jimmy Garoppolo, you can't say no to that. So you had to take it. But it stopped him from getting Kirk Cousins, which, again, Kirk Cousins and Jimmy Garoppolo, there's not much of a difference. And I think Jimmy's a better
other than
health. And I think Jimmy's a more of a winner than Kirk Cousins is. I don't think Kirk Cousins is a winner. He's a loser.
I'll give you that.
Yeah, I don't get it. But we'll see. It'll be really interesting. I really hope for the 49ers to have everything crash and burn. I really want Jimmy to start playing and play really well, and have them completely regret their whole decision to having Trey Lance. So that's what I really want to see this year.
That's fair.
All right. Anything else on your end?
Nope. Just happy that start of the season's coming. Going to NFL opening day versus Buffalo Bills versus the Rams in LA. Since both teams can't lose, I guess I'll have to root for the Rams, but should be interesting. Happy that the real football games are starting, and just looking forward to it. It's going to be a fun season.
That's going to be great. All right. So again, everyone check us out. Our new website, pats300levelpod.com. And everything's revamped there from before. And then follow us Twitter, Instagram at Pats300levelpod for up-to-minute updates and news of the day. We're going to have some new blogs coming out the next couple of weeks or so. this week before the game, and then afterwards, obviously the kind of recap of the Dolphins game. And again, if you haven't checked it out, check out the last podcast, episode 33 with Matt Chatham. Great breakdown from him. Really happy to have him on. And again, check out his website, rubsmokelove.com. Follow him on Twitter, rubsmokelove. Or Chatham58. Really good insights from him. Great breakdowns and some really great barbecue seasonings there.
Yep.
All right, so we'll talk to you again after the Dolphins game, hopefully for a Patriots win. So we'll talk to you guys next time. And again, subscribe, rate, and review. Talk to you next time.